because, unless someone has really kind of perfected the art of barrel finishing, and there's a few brands that I think do it really, really well, unless they're using a wet barrel, the odds of getting something in a short time frame like what we're seeing on some of these, we put it in a barrel for 2 months, and unless it's Amberana, you might not have picked up much unless you have a really, really soft whiskey to begin with. And so, it didn't have a ton of flavor, and so you pick up everything else. The longer finishes seem like you're going to get more character or more interest or I don't know, more experimentation out of it, right? Because if it's not a wet barrel, what are you really getting in a 3-month time frame when you use barrel?
Well, I think that's a great call out. I think when I look at finishing, I think there's a lot of shortcuts that don't have to be reported. Whether or not you're stave forcing, oak chipping, using a fan. There's a certain amount of adjunct that can go in that barrel that's really hard to track and report. So, I think you're seeing people fill on top of barrels that have other components that aren't purely bourbon and aren't purely barrel. And that's not a criticism. Like, those shortcuts are part of the industry, and it's not, if we felt differently, we need to regulate it out. It's kind of like my view. But with us, like, we're definitely purists on kind of all fronts. There's a reason we don't chill filter. There's a reason we don't carbon filter. We're grains, yeast, water, and barrel on everything we do. And I think that's kind of our view with finishing. It's like, if you're buying these really pretty, $1,200, 400, liter, sherry butts and stuff, like, let them do the work that they were intended to do. I think VDN was the same thing. I mean, you're talking, that's like a $400 or $500 barrel that had a beautiful orange wine in it. Throw your whiskey in and let it run. I mean, it's like, you don't need to synthetically boost to expedite your process, because then you're really not articulating what that marriage would actually look like, and I think for me, it's like, when I've had some other examples of it, I had a whiskey that was finished in a peach brandy barrel that tastes like peach rings. That's not what peach eau de vie tastes like. That's not the tones that barrel would produce. So then it's like, well, are people getting a misrepresentation of like what that should be? And I love fortified wines, always great. I think you can do some really cool stuff with that. But with anything, you can't rush it. I mean, even when we talk about like age statements, it's like, yeah, it takes time, and you can rush it, and there's a purpose from a financial or business sense of doing that. But if you want to make the best whiskey you can, it's got to be patient, and you got to let it do its thing. And sometimes, I think rum is a great example.